Thank you. Today is a day of optimism, I think, a day to realize that the hard decisions of the last 2 years are beginning to bear fruit. Today is a day to realize that together we can do great things for the families of Connecticut and for the future generations. Our state is finally moving forward, and today we will hear from a man who is leading us in that new direction and who is about to describe his vision for the path that we should follow over the next 2 years. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce my friend, our true leader, the true leader of the state of Connecticut, the Governor, Dannel P. Malloy.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Great to be with you. Evan, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. We've got some work to do. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Come on, let's get to work. Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, Senator McKinney, Representative Cafaro, ladies and gentlemen of the General Assembly, thank you for inviting me back into the People's House to address you. I want to recognize and thank my trusted friend and advisor and Connecticut's exceptional Lieutenant Governor Nancy Wyman. I'd like to thank my wife for being here today and for her love and support. Thank you, Kathy. As always, let us thank and honor the brave men and women of Connecticut serving in our armed forces around the globe. And let us continue to keep in our hearts the many families, first responders, educators, and others that have been touched by the senseless tragedy in Newtown. Whatever differences we may have in this building over the next several months, they will be trivial compared to what happened in a quiet town in southwestern Connecticut. We gather today with wounds not yet healed, but also with the unwavering belief in our state and in our future. 2 years ago, in the wake of the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression, Connecticut began a journey. The choices we made marked the beginning of a fundamental shift in how we plan for the future, in how we set our priorities, and how we approach our problems. Problems that included a worst-in-the-nation per capita deficit, a budget that relied too heavily on gimmicks and one-time revenues, financial commitments that, if we had failed to act, would fall on the shoulders of our children, and problems for which we knew there were no simple answers. It no longer matters who caused those problems. What matters is that together we started to fix them. In our balanced budget and in the adjustments we made along the way, we did two fundamental things. First, we made our budget honest, transparent, and built to address Connecticut's long-term obligations. In other words, we made it responsible. Second, even as we began living within our means, we invested what resources we did have strategically in the initiatives most likely to create jobs and grow our economy in the years ahead. We did all of that while maintaining our commitment to our towns and cities so that we weren't simply passing the buck or shifting the burden as too many other states are doing. We did it without shredding our safety net, and we did it while still finding ways to make historic investments in education. In short, we got serious about our problems, and we started setting clear priorities. Let's consider where we would be today, what kind of Connecticut we'd be living in if we had not begun the hard work of change 2 years ago, if we had allowed Connecticut to continue down the other road without a plan or clear priorities. The simple truth is this: if we had taken that other road, there would be 41,000 more people in Connecticut going without health care right now. We didn't take that road, and it didn't happen. Those 41,000 individuals are covered today because of the work you did and the choices that we made together. If we had taken that other road, 950 more Connecticut children would be showing up for school this coming September on Prepared to Learn. That's 950 more kids in Windsor and Torrington and New Britain and Norwich and throughout the state, starting out on day one, a step behind their peers and already struggling to catch up. We didn't let that happen. Those kids are going to be better prepared thanks to you. If we had taken that other road, we would have saddled our children with a $4.5 billion pension payment in the year 2032. A payment that simply would not have been possible. We didn't let that happen. We accepted our responsibility and avoided a future disaster. If we had taken that other road, instead of bringing Jackson Laboratories or NBC Sports or Amazon to Connecticut, we'd be watching them build and grow in other states. We didn't let that happen. We fought for those jobs in a way that Connecticut never had before. And we're going to bring more jobs in the months and years ahead. And today, that other road would have left us with a deficit of more than $3 billion. We didn't let that happen. And we're not going to let it happen this year either. The budget I am proposing today keeps us firmly in balance. Slowly, deliberately, and sometimes painfully, we're building a more sustainable future for Connecticut. As we work together to build that future, we know that it takes time for the changes made here in Hartford to be felt throughout the state. After all, our financial house was in rubble, and rebuilding out of rubble takes time. It's true that today, despite the many good and difficult things we are doing to turn Connecticut around, too many hardworking people still feel left out or just left behind. I know many people who are ready to work but can't find a job, who have a job but the salary that was once enough just doesn't go as far as it used to, who saved to buy a home and now they're worried they might lose it, who dream big for their children and grandchildren but wonder what kind of future those children will have. They are the people that we represent in communities across this great state. People we talk to each and every day. They're our neighbors, our friends, and our family. I want to assure you, this state, government shares their worries. None of us here today are satisfied with an unemployment rate that remains too high, with an economy that remains too sluggish. Connecticut families have had to buckle down, make tough decisions, pay their bills, make sacrifices, and find compromises, and at the same time keep doing whatever they could to invest in their future. And so must their government. We still have a long road ahead, a lot of work to do, but finally we have a plan in place and a destination in mind. The budget I am proposing today keeps Connecticut moving toward that destination. It follows the simple principles we agreed on 2 years ago. Passing an honest, balanced budget, living within our means, making government smaller and more responsive, and sticking to our plan for growing Connecticut's economy. Most importantly, my plan honors those principles while protecting our hardworking middle-class families. The simplest way it does that is this. My proposed budget does not include any new taxes. It is true that the families and businesses of Connecticut have enough on their shoulders. This budget asks no more of them. In fact, I'm proposing we give them some much-needed and deserved help. Here's something else this budget does not do. It does not exceed our spending cap. I know that past administrations chose to blow through that cap. We cannot and will not go down that road. Connecticut must live within its means. And to help ensure we really are living within our means, here's something this budget does do. It completes the move to generally accepted accounting principles. This budget is fully balanced under GAAP. That's a promise we made 2 years ago, and it is a promise kept. Simply put, that means if you have to balance your checkbook, honestly, if you have to do that, so should your state government. We're also simplifying our state's finances. For too long, we continued to add line item after line item to our budget, making it far more complex than it needed to be. In this budget, we've either merged or eliminated nearly 150 appropriations, programs, or earmarks. That's a 22% reduction. Of course, it isn't enough that we're just streamlining our books or looking at them more honestly. To get our fiscal house in order, we needed to make some hard choices. In this budget, we've made lots of hard choices. In total, I am proposing more than $1.8 billion in spending reductions from our current services budget over the next 2 years. Let's put that number in context. In November of 2010, the previous administration projected a $3.4 billion structural deficit for the following year. Instead, we ended that year with a $140 million gap, which we filled. And for this fiscal year, they projected a $3.1 billion deficit. Instead, our budget is now balanced. As you review my plan, you may find cutbacks in programs or grants that you hold dear, things you fought hard for. Let's face it, there are 187 elected legislators in Connecticut, each with individual priorities. No matter what our politics, however, we all love this state and want what's best for it. So when it comes to finding savings, we all have our own idea of what things can't be touched. As Shakespeare said, therein is the rub. For too long, for decades, in fact, Connecticut seemed unable or unwilling to prioritize, to make those hard decisions about where to cut. We spent too much on too many different things, and we failed to invest in the few big, bold things that we most needed. Thanks to all of you, thanks to your hard work and willingness to find compromise, we're finally headed in the right direction, and we're going to stay that course. It won't always be easy, especially when Connecticut continues to face rising costs in a few key areas. Whether it's $300 million in additional Medicaid growth, the rising price of keeping up with our state pensions, or moving to a more honest system of budgeting. These are the obligations of a responsible state government. Connecticut long ago made a promise to teachers that paid into their retirement fund, to working parents that rely on Medicaid for basic health care. And 2 years ago, we made a promise to ourselves that we were finally going to get serious about our finances by moving to GAAP. We're going to keep and fund those promises. In order to do that, even as costs go up, my budget cuts $862 million off the current services budget in year one, and more than $1 billion off in year two. No matter how we get there, the bottom line is this: we should not spend more than the amount I've recommended in this budget. Connecticut families know what it's like to find themselves paying a little bit more for the things they need, like groceries, a medical bill, or college tuition for a child. Costs are going up, so what do? They find places to cut back. They find savings. Their state government is going to do the same. We're going to continue the hard work of keeping our own budget in the black year in and year out. We do that. We make those cuts so that we can stay focused on our priorities. One of those priorities must be a refusal to shift our burdens onto Connecticut's towns and cities. A promise that we won't pass the buck to every family struggling to pay their local property tax bill. Today, I am proposing that we make the same promise that was made and kept 2 years ago. that once again we hold municipalities harmless in this budget. So that cuts made here in Hartford don't come at the cost of higher property taxes around the state. The first way we do that is by helping towns fund their most important mission, education. My budget increases education cost-sharing funding by $152 million over the next 2 years. In 2014, that will mean an additional $2.8 million for Hamden and $2 million more for Norwalk. It means an additional $6 million for Danbury and $1.1 million more for Enfield. We're also going to help grow our local economies. Our capital budget will invest nearly $1.5 billion into cities and towns in each of the next 2 years. That includes $140 million in total funding for Urban Act and STEEP grants, $173 million over the next 2 years for new projects through the Town Aid Road and local capital improvement programs, more than $980 million to help our towns build new schools, schools that will help kids learn better in modern classrooms at the same time that they support property values in our neighborhoods. And finally, we're also investing in our local bridge program, $15 million in the coming year for new grants to help towns update their infrastructure. Now, I spoke earlier about the need to make sure Connecticut families feel the benefit of what we're doing in this budget. These critical investments in cities, in towns, in our roads, in our schools, in our parks represent the largest commitment in decades to growing our local economies and improving the quality of life for our residents. Connecticut families will feel this difference. We've talked about the cuts we need to make, about holding the line on spending and on taxes, and about keeping our promise to towns. But we can't stop there. Even in difficult times, especially in difficult times, we have to keep investing in our future. It is incumbent upon state government to pursue jobs actively and aggressively. Now, I know some among you will criticize that philosophy, those who think it isn't government's place to help stimulate growth. But I fundamentally disagree. Burying our heads in the sand is not a strategy, and sitting still is not an option. Even as we find savings, even as we continue to support our towns and cities, we have to work to grow jobs. To start with, I am proposing the Bioscience Innovation Act. This new program will establish a $200 million fund to strengthen Connecticut's bioscience sector over the next 10 years. We've seen what's possible in this industry. Jackson Laboratories has already broken ground in Farmington and begun hiring Connecticut workers in good-paying jobs with good benefits. We estimate that they're going to support 6,800 permanent jobs once they're fully developed. But this isn't just about Jackson. It's also about Alexion in New Haven and Dorada in Branford, about the many other great companies and entrepreneurs throughout Connecticut already working in this rapidly growing field. And the impact extends far beyond simply bioscience. Cultivating this industry and creating these kinds of jobs means we have more people eating in our restaurants and shopping in our stores. It will mean a broader economic base for our towns and for our state. And these are investments. They are investments in the truest sense of the word. With an appropriate level of state support, we're able to attract far more in private dollars, and we're able to better leverage federal funding. We have to compete for every job, and the Bioscience Innovation Act will help us do exactly that. We're helping employers in other ways. This week, my administration will finalize our state's first ever comprehensive energy strategy, placing us on a path to a more sustainable economic and environmental future. This plan will help us take advantage of enhanced energy efficiencies to drive down energy costs for families and for businesses. It will promote distributed generation and microgrids to increase energy reliability. It will drastically improve consumer choice by addressing the expansion of natural gas where appropriate and in environmentally sound manner. And for customers that are near gas lines but not connected, it will offer a new $500 tax credit to help get them connected so that they can start saving money. We've gone far too long without understanding the connection between high energy costs, protecting our environment, and making Connecticut business more competitive. These issues are linked, and finally, we're going to treat them that way in Connecticut. We've already seen electric rates drop in Connecticut by 12% across the board in the last 2 years. The process of continuing those efforts as part of a broader strategy starts today. The legislation I am proposing will remove the regulatory and institutional barriers that have long prevented our state from being an energy leader. Let me say this. Now is the time for us to take control of our energy future. As we work to foster new jobs and lower energy costs, we also need to make sure we're helping grow the next generation of high-skilled workers. The creation of a strong public research university is critical to ensuring our long-term economic competitiveness. We must provide educational opportunities in science, in technology, in engineering, and in math. There was a time that Connecticut was a world leader in those areas. Our inventors created the first submarine, the portable typewriter, anesthesia, helicopters, and, of course, the Frisbee. Historically, we've ranked among the top states for patents on a per capita basis. But now we're in a global economy, and the competition has gotten much, much, much stiffer. My proposal is that we get Connecticut and UConn back in the game in a big way. We can do it with an injection of more than $1.5 billion over the next 10 years into a new program, Next Generation Connecticut. This funding will drive innovation, enhance job creation, and spur economic growth. And it will allow us to make strategic investments in new facilities, to offer more scholarships, and to add researchers. Together, we will fuel Connecticut's economy with new technologies and new employers, with more highly skilled graduates, more patents, more licenses, and more high-wage jobs. In stores, this funding will allow for more than 5,000 additional students, including a 70% increase in the number of engineering students. In Stamford, it will help create a new School of Fine Arts and Digital Design, a one-of-a-kind digital media degree for professionals so that they can find jobs at ESPN or NBC Sports or Charter Communications or other companies we will, in fact, attract to this state. And it will help build a new campus in Hartford, one that offers professional graduate programs in business and in engineering and in social work. That's just some of what this investment will do. And of course, the University of Connecticut is not the only home for Connecticut students. They learn and grow at all of our universities. Students from Eastern to Gateway to Norwalk Community College all deserve a college experience that prepares them for lifelong success. Our consolidated system under the Board of Regents for Higher Education is more responsive to how today's students learn. Through that system, more funding will go to the university and community college classrooms, as well as direct services. Connecticut's 4 state universities, its community colleges, are also an integral part of our economic development strategy. Our institutions of higher education represent so much. They represent the opportunity we offer our young students and the potential for our economy to grow and to prosper. They are the promise of Connecticut's future. Let's invest in them. Let's make them beacons that shine well beyond our borders, a clear signal of the promise and the potential that Connecticut and its people hold. Let's do this together. In much the same way that investing in UConn and other state colleges will help grow our economy, we also need to support K-12 public schools and their teachers. It is a moral obligation that we provide Connecticut's kids a high-quality education. But it's also in our economic interest to foster the next generation of scientists, teachers, doctors, engineers, business leaders, and entrepreneurs. In addition to the new ECS funding I mentioned earlier, my proposed budget continues to fund the critical education reforms we began last year. Over the next 2 years, we are continuing to improve student outcomes by increasing funding for Alliance districts by $144 million. We're turning around struggling schools by growing our commissioners' network with funding for 17 more schools. We're continuing to broaden the range of educational opportunities by maintaining our support for magnet schools, agricultural science schools, and other high-quality options, including funding for additional state charter schools. And while we help our underperforming schools, we're going to get out of the way of districts that are doing a good job. For high-performing schools, we can eliminate some burdensome reporting requirements and free them from some state mandates, and we need to do this. We can also do some things to make sure we reach our kids as early as possible. Quality early childhood education is one of the best investments we can make to close our achievement gap and put our children, all of our children, on a path to success. With the support and leadership of many, including the Graustein Memorial Fund and the Early Childhood Collaborative, today we take action on a charge given by this General Assembly in 2011, a charge to foster a true early childhood system. I am proposing that Connecticut's early childhood efforts, which are today divided across 5 state agencies, be consolidated under one new agency, the Office of Early Childhood. This office will better align state resources, increase data collection across several agencies, improve family outreach, and most importantly, prepare more youngsters for kindergarten and beyond. Beginning with early childhood, from K through 12, and all the way through higher education, my proposed budget supports education at every level. Despite the hard work of everyone in this chamber, and despite the many good things we've done to reshape Connecticut, too many in our middle class don't feel, I should say, the changes that we're making here in Hartford. The economic headwind is strong, and there are still too many unemployed or underemployed. So the question is, what do we tell those families I spoke about earlier, the ones that might not yet feel the changes we've set in motion together? There are things we can do to help right now. Things won't be easy for a while, and we can't solve anyone's problems overnight, but we can lighten their load. For one, we can begin to make our tax laws more fair and more sensible, especially when it comes to taxes that unfairly impact the middle class and those striving to be middle class. 10 years ago, a state blue ribbon commission found that Connecticut's motor vehicle property tax was, quote, especially unfair. The reason was that residents in different communities pay very different amounts on the same property value. It encourages people to register their cars in lower tax rate towns or even out of state, leaving the rest of us to foot the bills. Meanwhile, our towns and cities are spending too much time and too much money to collect a very small portion of their tax base. I know this issue has been taken up in different forms over the years, and that finding a workable solution has been difficult. But I think Connecticut is, in fact, getting better and better at solving tough problems. Today, I am proposing that we exempt the vast majority of Connecticut motor vehicles from a property tax. We can do it by providing an exemption twice. We can do it by providing an exemption from the property taxes for the first $20,000 of a vehicle's assessed value. That means owners of vehicles with a market value under $28,500 would pay no property taxes at all on those vehicles. The proposal would include more than 90% of all motor vehicles, whether they are owned by residents or businesses. To ease the transition, we can allow municipalities the option of providing this exemption or a portion of it for the tax year beginning this July 1st. After that, it would be implemented statewide beginning in July 2014. This is tax relief for families who are middle class, and working poor. It gives a break to businesses, especially small businesses, and it takes the administrative burden off of local government. We don't have to stop here, though. This shouldn't be a one-off solution, but the beginning of a broader strategy. That's why my budget also reinstates the tax exemption for items of clothing up to $25 starting next year. It does it as a first step towards completely reinstating the original $50 exemption in July of 2015. Of course, these changes won't solve all of working families' problems. But as we continue the hard work of reforming our state's finances and of growing jobs, they can still mean something to families working hard to make ends meet. Let's make it happen. Let's provide relief for working people across Connecticut, relief that they will feel. And there is more that we can and should do to help our middle class. Today, the unfortunate reality is that the rate of home foreclosures is still too high. Many of our residents have struggled as they wait for the economy to pick back up. For some, the clock is running out. New protections I announced last week will help give struggling homeowners a fighting chance. My plan will hold banks accountable with tougher penalties if they don't negotiate in good faith. It will give homeowners new tools to challenge a foreclosure in court. Now, I've met with people that are struggling to keep their homes. If these rules had already been in place, Debbie Sargunis in Thomaston would not have suffered needlessly through a year-long mediation process with her bank, one that found her meeting with different lawyers and different mediators at every turn. We must help families like Debbie's that are struggling to keep their home. We must stem the tide of foreclosures. The bill I am submitting to you will help us do just that. That's how we're helping homeowners stay in their homes. We also need to make sure our renters can find affordable places to live. We need to do it so that our low-income residents don't have to use so much of their personal income just to put a roof over their head. So our young people graduating from college can stay here in Connecticut to live and work where they grew up and where they went to school. And so that our elderly who have spent their lives in Connecticut aren't forced to move when they least want to and are least able to. This budget provides $221 million to invest in safe and affordable housing for Connecticut residents over the next biennium. To help coordinate these investments, we're also providing staff and programmatic funds for the Department of Housing, a new agency that will work aggressively to address housing needs across Connecticut. Finally, this budget also moves us forward on the issue of public health. When it comes to protecting Connecticut residents, there is no more simple or more sacred responsibility than making sure everyone has access to health care. As I said earlier, rising Medicaid costs continue to put pressure on our ability to provide critical services. But it is a challenge we can and will overcome. Thankfully, the Federal Affordable Care Act has given us an opportunity to do just that. Connecticut has become a national leader in the creation and development of our health insurance exchange, an innovative and competitive marketplace for care. My budget continues to grow that system. Doing so will save the state money and will help get more people covered. It's that simple. My plan also funds caseload growth for our health and human services agencies. meaning they will have the necessary resources to continue providing care. And we're funding ways to enhance how that care is delivered by continuing to focus on the community level. First, we're going to maintain our support for Money Follows the Person, a key program that helps our elderly that want to stay in their homes do just that. New funding will move Connecticut closer to our goal of transitioning more than 5,200 people out of nursing homes and back into their communities by 2016. Second, my budget will provide new streamlined support for community and school-based health centers. Rather than using ad hoc grants distributed without a strategic plan, we'll use one formula to ensure that every center receives funding and that the amount is based on how many people are receiving care at that facility. And third, we will renew our commitment to our nonprofit community provider network. In addition to existing bond authorizations, my capital budget establishes a new $40 million bond pool over the biennium for nonprofit health and human service providers. This pool has the potential to drastically lower the cost for providers by allowing them to quickly access funds for improvements at their facilities. It will make it easier to buy a new furnace, replace a leaky roof, or invest in a new IT system. It means our nonprofit organizations can devote even more of their resources toward what they do the very best, providing top-notch care. It's an investment that our community providers and their clients will feel, and we need to get this done. This session, let us do the hard jobs that we were elected to do by coming together to pass a balanced budget, by finding compromise, and by remembering that no matter what our politics, we all want what is best for Connecticut. I'd like to tell you that this budget solves all of our problems, but it does not. What it does do is keep us on a steady path to progress. It furthers a plan we started 2 years ago, a plan that to put our finances in order, to live within our means, and to do it while making bold investments to create jobs and grow our economy. My proposed budget is a clear indication of how far we've come together, and also a stark reminder of how far we still have to go. As we negotiate throughout this session, it is my hope that everyone in this chamber, Democrat and Republican, will be part of that process. Let's not allow our ideology to stand in the way of progress or compromise. There is much that we agree on. We all agree that we need to keep spending in check despite rising health care costs and other long-term obligations. This budget lives within our means and within our spending cap. To do that, we all agree that spending cuts are needed. This budget cuts more than $1.8 billion over the next 2 years of the current services budget. We all agree that we have to keep investing in jobs. This budget supports small businesses and entrepreneurs while working to attract new employers. We all agree that students of all ages deserve a quality education. This budget continues to fund education and puts our students on track for success. We all agree that we have no desire to shift the burden to our towns and cities, and this budget holds them harmless. And finally, we all agree that our middle class deserves a break. In this budget, they get a few. We help struggling homeowners stay in their home. We make energy bills a little more affordable. We make owning a car less expensive. And we make buying clothes just a little easier. Let's not make this budget about division. Let's make it about coming together and about continuing on a path that we started down 2 years ago. A journey to build a more prosperous and sustainable future for Connecticut. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you. And may God bless you. May God bless the great state of Connecticut. And may God bless the United States of America.